They never understood you. That was their first mistake. They saw contradiction and called it confusion. They saw restraint and called it weakness. They saw silence and assumed surrender. But what they were actually witnessing was control. You're holy and hood at the same time. And that terrifies people, because most people need you to be one thing: predictable, containable, easy to categorize. They need a label they can stick on you so they know how to approach you. But you don't fit inside their mental boxes. You can pray with discipline, and you can move with precision. You can show mercy, and you can enforce consequences. That duality makes people uncomfortable. They don't know whether to test you or respect you. So they test you. And that's where everything changes. See, the holy side of you believes in patience, in growth, in giving people room to reveal who they truly are. You don't react quickly. You observe, you calculate. You let patterns expose themselves. But the hood side of you, it never forgets. It keeps score silently. It studies tone, body language, micro disrespect, energy shifts. While everyone else thinks you're calm, you're gathering information. That's why when the shift happens, it shocks them. Because they thought you were soft. They thought your restraint meant you wouldn't move. They confused peace with passivity. Big mistake. There's a difference between someone who is harmless and someone who is controlled. A harmless person can't respond. A controlled person chooses not to. You choose, and that choice is power. You don't explode over small provocations. You don't bark at every challenge. You don't need noise to feel strong. Your power sits quietly, watching, waiting, like a blade inside velvet, and people sense it. That's why some are respectful around you, without fully knowing why. That's why certain individuals watch their tone when they speak. They can't explain it, but something about you says, be careful. It's not aggression, it's presence. You carry both discipline and danger in the same posture, and that balance, rare. Most people swing to extremes. They're either reckless emotion or empty morality. Either chaos with no boundaries or righteousness with no backbone. But you're balanced. You believe in forgiveness, but not at the cost of self-respect. You believe in growth, but not repeated disrespect. You believe in grace, but not stupidity. That's what makes you dangerous. Because you don't respond emotionally. You respond strategically. When someone crosses you, you don't scream. You adjust access. You don't threaten. You withdraw availability. You don't chase closure. You close doors, quietly. And that quiet is louder than any argument. People expect drama. They expect you to react so they can frame you as unstable. They expect you to break character so they can feel justified. But you don't. You tighten up. You become colder, sharper, more distant, and they feel it. Suddenly the energy shifts, conversations change, the warmth disappears, and they don't understand why. Because they thought you'd explode. Instead, you evolved. That's the Joker energy they never saw coming. Not chaos. Control. Not madness. Awareness. See, real power isn't loud. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't beg to be recognized. It doesn't argue to prove its worth. Real power observes long enough to know exactly where to strike, or when not to. And sometimes the strongest move is walking away permanently without explanation. That's the hood in you. And the holy part. It makes sure you don't become reckless while doing it. That's the balance. You don't destroy randomly. You don't retaliate blindly. You don't escalate emotionally. You calibrate. And once you decide someone has crossed a boundary beyond repair, There's no speech, no dramatic exit, no final warning. Just silence, permanent silence. That's what makes people nervous around you. Because they know if they cross that invisible line, they don't get chaos. They get erased. And being erased is worse than being fought. They can argue with anger. They can defend against insults. They can manipulate reactions. But they cannot fight absence. They cannot argue with indifference. They cannot control someone who has emotionally detached. That's your power. You mastered self-control before you mastered confrontation, and that discipline, that restraint, that duality of holy and hood, it makes you unpredictable in the most calculated way. And the world doesn't know how to deal with someone who can pray for peace and still enforce consequences without blinking. Here's what they don't realize about you. You don't snap, you shift. There's no dramatic moment where you explode and announce that you're done. No loud confrontation. No public scene. No warning sirens, just a subtle recalibration. And once that switch flips, it never flips back. That's what scares people the most. Because they can't pinpoint when they lost you. At first, you still smile. You still respond. You still show up. But something changes behind your eyes. You're no longer investing. You're assessing. Every word they say gets weighed. Every action gets logged. Every inconsistency gets stored. The holy side of you gives them chances. The hood side of you counts them. See, you don't expect perfection from anyone. You understand flaws. You understand trauma. You understand that people are complicated. But what you don't tolerate, disrespect disguised as personality, manipulation disguised as confusion, betrayal disguised as mistakes. Once you see the pattern, it's over. Not loudly, quietly. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your intentions. You stop offering access to your inner world. And that's when they begin to feel it. Because access to you is a privilege. Your energy isn't chaotic. It's focused. Intentional. Clean. You don't let everyone into your mind. You don't let everyone into your plans. You don't let everyone into your vulnerability. So when someone loses that access, they feel the temperature drop. Conversations become surface level. Responses become shorter. Invitations become rarer. And they can't figure out what happened. But you know exactly what happened. They crossed a line they didn't see. You see, most people mistake kindness for weakness. They assume because you don't react aggressively, you must not be capable of it. But capability and restraint are not opposites. They are partners. You are fully aware of what you could do, what you could say, how you could respond. You simply choose not to. That choice is what makes you dangerous. Because when someone finally pushes you too far, you don't get emotional. You get surgical. No yelling, no insults, no revenge schemes. Just boundaries enforced with ice, cold precision. And here's the part that hits hardest. You don't come back. Once someone proves they can't handle your grace, they don't get your presence. You forgive, but you don't forget the lesson. You release, but you don't reattach. You move on, but you don't circle back. That's hood discipline. The holy part of you hopes people change. The hood part of you prepares for the fact that they won't. So you never depend on potential. You respond to patterns, and patterns don't lie. That's why your exits are permanent. Not because you hate, not because you're bitter, not because you're dramatic, but because you respect yourself enough to know that once someone shows consistent disrespect, they are disqualified from deeper access. You don't negotiate with red flags. You don't debate boundaries. You don't beg for basic decency. You observe once. You confirm twice. You disappear the third time. People think you're unpredictable. You're not. You're observant. And when you detach, you do it cleanly. No social media subtweets. No passive aggression. No indirect messages. Just absence. And absence forces reflection. They replay conversations. They analyze their tone. They wonder where it shifted. But you already processed it weeks ago. That's another thing about you. You don't react immediately because you're thinking long term. While they're caught in emotion, you're calculating impact. While they're focused on winning arguments, you're deciding who stays in your life. While they're trying to dominate the moment, you're controlling the outcome. That's the Joker energy people misunderstand. It's not chaos. It's psychological patience. It's letting people underestimate you until they expose themselves. It's letting them talk freely while you memorize the details. It's letting them believe they have power until you remove yourself entirely. And once you remove yourself, there's no access to negotiate. No emotions to manipulate. No reactions to provoke. You become untouchable, not because you're heartless, but because you mastered emotional discipline. You can love deeply, care genuinely, support loyally, but the second loyalty is disrespected, you go silent. And your silence is heavier than any confrontation could ever be. That's the balance. Holy enough to wish them well. Hood enough to never let them back in. Now let's talk about the part they really fear. It's not your anger. It's not your strength. It's not even your ability to walk away. It's your emotional detachment once you've made a decision. Because when you're done, you're done. There's no secret longing. No hidden hope. No late night reconsideration. Once your spirit withdraws, it doesn't revisit. That's what makes you different. Most people detach loudly. They block, they rant, they announce. They try to prove they've moved on. You go quiet, and your quiet feels permanent. That's why people test you carefully. They sense that if they miscalculate, they won't get a second audition. You don't do repeat betrayals. You don't rehearse apologies. You don't recycle relationships. The holy side of you believes in grace. But grace does not mean access. That's the distinction they never understood. You can forgive someone and still remove them. You can wish someone well and still never speak to them again. You can let go without hatred. And that level of emotional maturity, it's unsettling. Because most people operate on attachment and reaction. They need noise to feel relevant. They need chaos to feel powerful. They need conflict to feel connected. You don't. You're comfortable in solitude. You're comfortable in silence. You're comfortable knowing that walking alone is better than walking with misaligned energy. That's hood clarity. You're not afraid of being by yourself. You're afraid of lowering your standards. And once someone drops below your standard consistently, you stop negotiating. There's a moment, subtle but irreversible, when your mind decides, this person no longer qualifies. And after that moment, everything shifts. You still move respectfully. You still speak calmly. You still maintain composure. But emotionally, they're already gone. That's the part people never see coming. They think they have more time. They think they can fix it later. They think your patience is endless. It's not endless. It's measured. And once the measurement is complete, your withdrawal is silent and surgical. No dramatic closure conversation. No emotional breakdown. No revenge. Just removal. You remove your energy, your vulnerability, your availability, And without those, most people don't know how to connect to you. Because connection with you was always a privilege. You don't give surface-level loyalty. You give depth. You don't give half trust. You give full presence. So when that presence disappears, the absence is heavy, and suddenly they realize you weren't just there. You were stabilizing things, balancing things, holding things together. Your calmness kept situations from exploding. Your maturity kept conflicts from escalating. Your loyalty kept dynamics intact. And when you leave, the structure shakes. But by then, you're already gone. The Joker energy in you isn't about destruction. It's about strategic withdrawal. You let people underestimate you. You let them think they have leverage. You let them assume they control the narrative, until you quietly step out of it. And once you're no longer playing the role they assigned you, they don't know how to reposition. Because you were never what they thought you were. You were observing the entire time. That duality, holy and hood, is discipline in motion. Holy enough to not sabotage, hood enough to never tolerate, holy enough to seek peace, hood enough to enforce respect. You don't beg for loyalty. You don't chase validation. You don't explain your boundaries repeatedly. You state them once. You demonstrate them once. And if they're crossed again, you disappear. And here's the truth. You don't come back because loneliness never scares you more than disrespect. You'd rather rebuild alone than rebuild with someone who fractured your trust. That's strength. That's clarity. That's power controlled. Most people want you loud so they can respond. They want you angry so they can defend. They want you emotional so they can manipulate. But when you're calm and detached, they have nothing to grab onto. You become untouchable not because you threaten anyone, but because you require alignment. And alignment is rare. Here's the final layer. The one they never admit out loud. They don't fear your anger. They fear your indifference. Because anger means you still care. Emotion means they still matter. Reaction means they still have access. Indifference, that means they've been erased. And once you erase someone emotionally, there is no recovery plan. You don't hate them. You don't curse them. You don't stalk their progress. You don't compete. You simply detach your energy. And energy is everything. The holy side of you understands something most people don't. Holding grudges ties you spiritually to what hurt you. So you don't hold grudges. You release. But the hood side of you understands something equally important. Releasing doesn't require re-entry. You can forgive and still permanently close the door. That balance makes you unstoppable. Because now your movements aren't emotional, they're intentional. You don't respond to provocation. You don't chase clarification. You don't seek closure from people who lack comprehension. You close chapters internally. And once a chapter is closed in your mind, the world could burn and you still wouldn't reopen it. That's discipline at a level most people never reach. They think strength is confrontation. They think power is dominance. They think control is volume. But you learn something different. Real control is emotional neutrality. Real power is the ability to walk away without needing the last word. Real dominance is being unaffected. When someone tries to trigger you and fails, that shakes them. When someone expects you to argue and you disengage, that confuses them. When someone thinks they can return after disrespect and you don't even respond, that humbles them. Because now they realize your presence was never guaranteed. You weren't lucky to have them. They were fortunate to have access to you. And once that access expires, It's non-renewable. That's the hood contract. You don't do temporary standards. You don't do conditional respect. You don't do second chances for repeated patterns. The holy part of you says, may you grow. The hood part of you says, just not with me. And that's peace. That's power. That's evolution. You're no longer trying to prove anything. Not your intelligence. Not your strength. Not your loyalty. Not your depth. People who recognize it will align. People who don't will expose themselves. Either way, you stay balanced. And here's the shift that completes your transformation. You stop seeing loss as pain. You start seeing it as filtration. Every person who exits your life, due to your boundaries, was never aligned with your future. Every relationship that collapses under your standards was built on convenience, not respect. Every opportunity that disappears when you refuse to compromise your integrity was never meant to sustain you. You don't lose people. You outgrow them. And growth is uncomfortable for those who remain stagnant. That's why they call you different now. Colder. More distant. More serious. They don't realize you're not colder. You're clearer. You're not distant. You're selective. You're not serious. You're intentional. Holy enough to wish them peace. Hood enough to enforce distance. You walk through life now with a different posture. Calm, measured, unreachable. Not because you think you're above anyone, but because you finally understand your value. And once you understand your value, you stop negotiating it. That's the Joker lesson beneath it all. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who has mastered themselves. You mastered your reactions. You mastered your attachments. You mastered your exits. And now, you don't need to threaten. You don't need to intimidate. You don't need to perform strength. Your silence does it for you. You're holy and hood at the same time. Merciful, but not knave. Kind, but not soft. Patient, but not passive. Loving, but not blind. And once someone crosses the line, they don't meet your anger. They meet your absence, an absence from someone like you. That's permanent. That's the final form. Not revenge, not chaos, not destruction, just evolution so complete. That access to you becomes a privilege very few ever earn again.